Hi, good morning. This is Raquel Furra with Bullseye Engagement. Thank you everyone for coming today to our HR Leadership Roundtable with Bullseye. So again, Raquel Furra, Bullseye Engagement, VP of Client Success and Services. We also have Kayleen on the call from Bullseye.
Hello everyone, good morning. I'm Kayleen Babel, Manager of Customer Communications and Marketing.
Right, and today we have our guest speaker, which is Heidi Barson with Wayne County. Heidi, you want to say hi?
Hi everybody, Heidi Barson.
Okay, so for today's agenda, we've got Heidi Barson with Wayne County that will give us some best practices on remote work. We'll then do a breakout session, and then we will have an open floor for our roundtable discussions of these best practices. And then we're just at a super high level gonna share with you our new release, which is our Ethics Lifeline. And with that, Kayleen, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Alrighty, so I have the pleasure of introducing Heidi Barson. She's our guest speaker this morning. Heidi comes to us from Wayne County, and she is Division Administrator of Employee Engagement. So Heidi develops and facilitates employee engagement initiatives for 3,300 employees countywide. And she's previously held a variety of HR roles in various industries. And she's currently pursuing her Ph.D. in the field of industrial and organizational psychology. So with that, I will pass it on to you, Heidi. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kayleen. Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to discuss some things to focus on while working remotely. As Division Administrator of Employee Engagement, I oversee onboarding, training and development, performance management, career pathing, and succession planning for all Wayne County. And in an effort to keep employees engaged and connected, Employee Engagement has created and disseminated 2 separate series of infographics. One solely dedicated to our management staff, and the other for all of our employees, which was sent out countywide via e-communication. And so the information we're about to discuss was one of the infographics in our ongoing series. I hope you find it relevant, and I look forward to the continued conversation after the discussion. So let's get started. The 4 topics that we're going to focus on are getting organized, avoiding distractions, staying connected, and communicating effectively. So getting organized. I found that implementing a file system for any non-electronic document was helpful. And in researching kind of tips and tricks and best practices for remote work, I actually stumbled upon this. And while I did it, my idea of non-electronic filing system was a pile. I found that actually putting them in file folders was actually a better way of handling the information that I had to keep. Some documents are sent to me that need to be signed and scanned and sent back. Other things, even though I may have, and many people may have 2 screens, I often find myself needing something else to reference. And so these documentations and things that I'm keeping, it helps to have a separate kind of small filing system for them. Also, having necessary equipment up and ready to use. I'm familiar with working remotely, not as often as I am now, but having my equipment up was commonplace for me because I have a designated office spot at home and I'm frequently on the computer. So I have 2 screens at home, 2 screens at work, so the transition wasn't odd. But in general, it's important to have the equipment up and ready to use. And if you can't log into your virtual desktops and the organization, it's helpful to make sure that you're contacting with your technology departments and making sure that you have the proper equipment and that you can get into it, whether it's headphones, computers, laptops, things of that nature. Also, recreating your office workspace at home. Again, when I was researching this information, one of the things I happened upon was that recreating your office space at home actually put you in the work zone, and it helped to drive the motivation for work and task completion. And so I did that. I set up some of the things that I could as best that I could to mimic how I have it at work. And it does seem to help. Planning out your workday. So planning out your workday is really a time management tip, right? And in the way of remote work, it helps to keep an ongoing kind of plan your workday, and oftentimes we have to reevaluate because things will come in that need attention immediately. So having your workday planned out, mapping out particular tasks and time frames, especially if you have time-bound items to complete, this is really beneficial in helping me stay organized. And again, it is a kind of a critical time management tip. So at least in time management, though, we organize things whether they're, important or urgent, and, we utilize that concept. But in general, staying organized and getting organized, planning out your workday is very beneficial. So you might ask, what does staying healthy have to do with, getting organized? But you have to kind of plan to stay healthy, right? Another one of the things that I found in researching these topics was that people are tending to work longer hours because it's so easy to jump on an email on your phone or to stay at your desk longer. So work-life balance is becoming blurred. And so staying healthy, organizing it into your day and making and carving out time for staying healthy is a very important part of being productive for working remotely. So I found that planning snacks, drinking a lot of water, and getting up and stretching and getting around helps to keep, me healthy and focused. So avoiding distractions. It's easy to say stay focused on task completion, right? Oh, stay focused on task completion. But one of the things I found was the act of mindfulness. And that is making a point to remind yourself which tasks, and that also goes back to making that plan, need to be completed. Even if you're putting up a Post-it that has the task that needs to be completed by a specific time is one suggestion. But again, the act of reminding yourself and keeping in mind that this is a particular thing that needs completion is an important way to remain focused. And one thing I have absolutely found to be a tremendous help was avoiding social media during my work hours. So I do this by flipping off my notifications. It can be very distracting. You're at work and you're working on something and maybe you get stuck, you have a block, and your notification goes off. It's real easy to pick up the phone and start thumbing through any of our social media. That can completely pull us out of the mode that we're in when we're trying to create or do or complete a task. So I found that turning off notifications was actually very helpful. Sometimes I even will put my phone behind me because if I see the screen light up, I can get distracted. And communicating your work schedule to family and friends. This is another tip that was suggested that, now we have a lot of family members and friends at home as well. Some are laid off or furloughed, and their time schedule might be a little bit different. You're working remotely, so you're trying to adhere to a particular time frame, a work schedule. So letting them know what your work schedule looks like. Additionally, even specific things For example, myself, I will have web trainings that I'm running and or meetings that I'm doing or going to. So if I have a block of time, I might say that, you know, today or this week I have a lot of meetings. So communication is key and always, and so letting them know work schedule is important. Do not handle personal tasks during work hours. There's a few reasons for this. You know, one, we want to make sure that, you know, we're living up to the expectations that are on us for our work schedule and how many hours that we're supposed to work. But additionally, handling personal tasks, it is very easy to fall into that. We may say, oh, we're going to be healthy, but we're going to go stand up and walk downstairs. And then downstairs we have some dishes. So we're going to start doing dishes. And then the dog wants to go out. So it is very easily distracting. It's a kind of a slippery slope in that if you're working and you jump to a personal task, that then that can start to overwhelm or overtake your day. So again, trying to stay focused, we go back to that on, you know, the things that you need to do, but additionally avoiding the distraction of, you know, going somewhere to do a particular personal task is an important way to avoid the distraction. So now we're going to have a poll question so we can get some discussion going. And I'm excited for this. And Raquel is going to facilitate this. Raquel?
Yes, hello, hello. So I'm going to launch it and it should pop up in everybody's queue as far as a polling question. So the question is, what has been your biggest distraction for you while working from home? And there are several options. So if everybody will take a minute and just look at that, and then we will display it. Okay, looks like we've got a little over half of everybody. So wait just another few seconds here. Okay, anybody else want to add their biggest distraction? And honestly, it could be different on different days, though we didn't give you multiple choice, but okay, we'll give it another couple seconds and then we'll close it out. All right, so I'm going to end the poll and then I'm going to share the results. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so it looks like we've got a couple people that said spotty internet connections or technical issues. One's household chores in between calls, social media, family members. And then, well, we've got one rock star. So hats off to you. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. Again, it's some days it could be very different. For me, I will tell you, on Thursdays is lawn service day. So at a certain time of the day, that's one of my biggest distractions is the lawn service that I don't really have a control over. So I'm going to stop sharing and Heidi will turn it back over to you.
Okay, great, Raquel, thank you. And so good, I don't feel alone. Those things like doing household chores and between calls and social media and disruptions like that, they are out there. But I know I'm gonna wanna talk with our rock stars so we can get their input afterwards, because I'm sure they have some additional tips and tricks that can help us stay focused while working remotely. That's awesome, thanks for sharing. So staying connected, I don't know about you, but I will share that in general, our organizations had their issues around communication to begin with. And I think many organizations suffer from this, but even more so organizations that are so widely dispersed, like Wayne County. We're not all in one location. We have different diverse businesses. And in that way, we're set up to be almost kind of separate entities. We have our elected offices, executive department, but intentionally, that's not our intention, right? So staying connected is important, even more so remotely. And remotely does add a degree of separation, if you will, that I've experienced and beginning to understand that needs to be addressed a little bit differently. So making sure you're readily available via email, phone, text, instant message, and video conference call. So we name all these, but realistically what we're saying is making sure that you're flexible and fluid with being connected and being connected at last minute. So I have found that I have been pulled into many video conferences and phone conferences at the last minute, and staying fluid and flexible to that is really what's making our my ability and the ability for our department to stay connected. Additionally, we talk about being proactive and connecting often with either your boss or your employees, teammates, or coworkers. And this is important. And the important part about it is that being proactive, right? A lot of times, and some of the research shows that working remotely, people tend to be less apt to ask questions or, speak up because they're remote. And especially in the situations where remote working wasn't the initial way of working, the way it's been kind of thrust on us during this pandemic. So being proactive, when I talk about, let's say, your boss or your team members, it's more important to be probably slightly more communicative now than previously. But what I'll say is, if, for example, you have a boss who, checked in with you weekly, then making sure that you're proactively reaching out to your boss with either updates or if you have a question would be as important, right? Even if you do it slightly more regularly, that too is good. One of the things I will say about that is that when you are reaching out to your boss or team members, preface things with, this is just an update, okay? So if you're sending the email, let them know this is just an update, let you know where they're at, what you're working on. Or additionally, if you have a question, or if it's both. So you might say, this is an update and I do have a question that needs an answer or a reply. So they know what they're looking at, kind of framing it for them. And it's the same thing with your team members, maybe even more so. You have employees, you're managing people. You want to make sure that you're reaching out to them. This is not an opportunity to micromanage. We don't want to do that, okay? And there is a tendency sometimes to overcompensate, with communication. So we want to be mindful and make sure that we are reaching out to our employees, sending kind of weekly updates. Or if it's a project management situation, there's a number of people that that are working on different tasks and things, you're going to want to address them and, let them know, specifically, what needs to be done and where you're at. So these communications are really important, but we stress being proactive, because if you're not proactive, we end up being reactive. So being proactive with communication is very healthy way of, working in a remote situation in general. It's very healthy for an organization to have this active communication. And get familiar with web conferencing and teleconferencing software. So not everybody, in my organization, we use WebEx, and usually it's predominantly with, division administrators, directors, managers. But we've encouraged employees to use free conference call to stay connected with coworkers, because they also may have projects and things to understand if it is a particular need, to use that mode of communication. So it also helps because I believe, and as it's been written and put out there, that remote work is going to be with us an important part of organizations for a long time to come. So the last thing we're going to discuss before we start having some communications with each other is communication skills. So making sure to discuss any doubts, questions, concerns, or feedback. And what I mentioned about that, and I bring up, the previous slide when I talk about being staying connected, people, what we've read is that people tend to be less inclined to ask questions or speak up or voice a concern working remotely. So it's important to take that time to share or discuss doubts, questions, concerns, and just feedback. Okay, where we have a hiring freeze going on, and so we are only hiring or replacing emergency positions. But one of the things that I suggested to managers was making sure that they have set check-ins where they can check with their employees, their new employees, making sure their new employees have all the resources and things that they need. So sharing results and successes. We don't want the communication only to be about doubts, concerns, and questions, right? We want to engage our employees. We want to make sure that they're encouraged and feel comfortable bringing those things to us, but we also want to make sure that we're sharing results. And this is both from a boss position, but also from an employee position, right? We want to hear about successes, and bosses should share successes, okay, and results. This is a way to keep people actively engaged. We work on this, in general, when we're not working remote. So imagine, now we have this remote work situation, and we have people who are doing sometimes double duty due to layoffs. So communication is a very important tool in driving engagement and connectivity and productivity. Another trick is communicate your schedule to coworkers, teammates, and boss. This is a little bit different than, letting your family and friends know your work schedule. But communicating your schedule to coworkers, teammates, and boss, meaning there could be a change in your work schedule, or there could be set meetings on Wednesdays and Fridays, and you won't be available during this time and that time, or you have taken 2 or 3 hours off to take care of something. And so communicating regularly about these changes and updating people, coworkers, teammates, and boss is very helpful, right? Because somebody could send you out an email that, they are expecting a reply during your work hours. And if your schedule has changed, they don't know. So getting expectations on deadlines, working hours, and preferred methods of communication. Again, that goes for, boss, coworkers, teammates. The expectation on deadline, somebody says, well, I need this soon. Soon is a relative term. There are many relative terms, but there are many terms when it comes to time-bound things that are relative to that person. So if my boss says soon could mean end of day or end of week for me, right? Soon needs to be very much detailed. We want to get the expectation of the time in an actual time-bound, time date type of way. Your working hours, sometimes your teammates may be more focused. They have certain meetings that are going on, but maybe it's better to have a meeting with your group members on a Wednesday, midweek, early, to discuss and update what's going on, right? So setting those things, setting the expectations, and discussing the preferred methods of communication, okay? So email is great, but when you're talking about conceptual things, or you're working on projects that have multiple people working on them, and there's, you know, many ways and many things that are happening all at once, perhaps an email is not the best way to do it. Maybe having a web conference or a video conference, if it's going to be helpful to have a visual aid. Even if you're going to do a phone conference and you send out a PDF for people to thumb through, making sure that you're mixing or matching your method of communication to the appropriate type of communication, what you're trying to convey. So be clear and concise with verbal and written communication. I mentioned before about making sure if you're sending an email and you need a question asked, but you also want to update that person quickly, that you set it up that way. Hey, I have a question and I'm just wanting to update you. They know right away there's something that needs to be addressed. Consider the most appropriate communication tool for the circumstances, and that's you know, it's important, and we kind of discussed that and talked about that. And practice teleconferencing etiquette. So this is something I did a whole infographic on for, we went out via our e-communication to everybody. And just some, you know, quick tips would be practice connecting to conference calls, you know how to connect beforehand. Locate your access codes and, you know, participant IDs before even dialing in. Some other tips are joining the conference call early, right? If you need to work out some different kinks that might be happening, staying on topic. So if we're having a discussion about ERP, probably not a good time to talk about, you know, vacation days. So selectively muting your volume when conferencing. This was a huge pet peeve of my boss, and he has mentioned more than once that people need to selectively mute, because if you're somebody who actively listens, you may be nodding your head and moving in your chair, and those slight noises can be heard most often. That's why we suggest using headphones, because they work great. They help cancel out that noise and people can hear you better. So those are just some quick tips for, you know, teleconferencing etiquette or video etiquette. And this pretty much wraps up the, you know, discussion today, and we're going to have a poll. So again, I'm going to turn it over to Raquel, and I look forward to everybody participating, and then after that, having a discussion, an open discussion. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to launch our next poll. And the question is, has communication with your colleagues been easier, the same, or more challenging while working remote? Okay, so it looks like it's almost even, but a little heavier with more challenging, and some said the same. No one said easier. So that's understandable for sure.
Right.
Now we have our breakout session. This is the discussion, right? What are the biggest concerns employees have, that your employees have voiced while working remote, and how have you attempted to resolve their issue? And so I don't know if Ken or Megan, if you want to, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute both of y'all just in case either of y'all would like to share anything from your perspective with the team.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You know, I'm trying to think the biggest one concern. I think we have employees in a lot of different just life stages. So of course we hear the child care and that type of stuff. Honestly, I think our biggest recurring question has been, what is the future of remote work going to look like after COVID? I think everyone can adapt and is fine in the meantime, but that's what I was hoping to kind of hear from you guys, if you have any pulse on what other companies are doing totally post-COVID, taking out the whole health and safety side.
That's a good one. Heidi, anything from your perspective or your companies?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, essentially people have to have plans, right, to come back. Because remote work, I think, is going to be part of the future for businesses for a long time. I mean, it really is dependent upon the business, right, and the business need. But there needs to be a plan and some discussion, some top-level discussion about what it might look like, whether there's going to be full staff or half staff, you know, if you're going to rotate days and times. I know these were some of the questions that we're looking at for when we go back. And then there is a large part of the workforce that can actually work remotely and continue to work remotely. And what does that look like financially for your organization, right? These are some questions that need to be addressed, you know, from a budget standpoint, as well as a human standpoint, your HR standpoint. And not that those two don't go together, they do, but I'm just saying that these are questions that actually can't just be determined, you know, in one format, because it's going to be very much customized to the business and the business needs. I would start having conversations, getting that group together that needs to be, you know, in this meeting, that can look at some of the financial things, if it's going to save you money, you know, having people working remote versus the productivity. Is the productivity high with people who are working remote? There are certain things they're going to, you know, have to do. This is, you know, after, you know, post-COVID. So there's a lot of questions that need to be looked at, and a plan, kind of a strategy to that. And I know schools are doing the same thing. You know, a lot of them, you know, colleges who can kind of sequester their employees and keep them not their employees, their students who have been tested, they're on campus, they're not, you know, they're encouraged not to leave, you know, that's how they might be doing that. But additionally, schools at the lower levels are looking at doing a lot of web-based, a lot of, you know, split, you know, partial in-person versus, and then web. So again, I would suggest talking to the people that you need to include in that and discuss some of the, you know, weigh the pros and cons and look at what's going to best suit the organization.
Yeah, thank you.
Megan, anything else that you know, any other questions or observations that you've made from this perspective that you want to share?
Yeah, I think not necessarily on the content that we went over earlier, but I think just, you know, thinking through the future of work, I'm wondering if anybody has any ideas, because I think the role of the manager is going to be kind of shifting to managing somebody remotely is a different skill set than managing somebody in person. So I don't know if you guys have any ideas or resources on this shift. I think it's kind of nuanced with this shift to remote management.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And it's funny because I did a whole kind of e-communication that was sent out what was an e-communication? It was sent out strictly to our managers, anybody who has direct reports. And I addressed, you know, what it's like to manage remotely in an infographic, and I'm currently creating a training. What I can say is that the future of managers, especially working remotely, is going to look like more frequency of communication and check-ins, but also very much having to balance, you know, not tipping the scale and making it seem like micromanaging. And there's a lot to do that. You've got to really think about, you know, the way you're approaching your employees. So kind of setting a standard for that. So performance management and communication, and there was a number of things that might look differently. I can share that infographic with Raquel, and Raquel can send that to you. And if you want to use that as just kind of a point of reference or outline some of the things that we're talking. But yeah, it is going to be a lot different. And managing remote teams means that there has to be time carved out for engagement activities. And you can look up, and which is one of my suggestions online, different ways to engage employees remotely, which is, you know, maybe putting out a riddle, or, you know, there's many different ways. And I won't I won't get into that, but you can look that up, what might work for your business. But definitely performance management, the kind of communication point, and engagement as far as keeping people actively engaged and engaged versus disengaged means that there's going to have to be also time carved out for having, just conversations, right? Not necessarily framed around work, but conversations, because we don't realize that we're missing that when we're working remotely. And some people, they acclimate much better to that, because maybe that's how they've operated. But other people, and for the most part, we as humans are all pretty social beings, and the need for having a socialization is still there, especially to create a healthy team dynamic.
Thank you. And I'd love to get that infographic. Any resources are super helpful for us.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Heidi. Really, really good insight and really good perspective. So yeah, I'll definitely be happy to share that with you, Megan and Ken. So thank you so much, Heidi.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to Kayleen to conclude this. And yeah, as I turn it over to her, we want to give you guys just a super high level highlight on something new that Bullseye rolled out, and it's Ethics Lifeline. So Kayleen, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Okay, so the Ethics Lifeline is a really interesting tool that we have. It enables real-time anonymous messaging from anyone in the organization to leadership. So it guarantees the anonymity of the messenger, which is really important, because if someone has a fear of retaliation, if they have a complaint or an issue, then they have this resource to submit anonymously. So like I mentioned, it enables anyone in the organization to speak up about concerns. So for example, discrimination, harassment, or favoritism. And then this empowers leadership to immediately hear and address these concerns before the issues escalate. So when someone submits the message, it will be directed straight to the party or department designated by your organization to receive and consider complaints. And this designated leadership will also be able to access confidential reporting and analytics about the complaints that are being submitted. So just a brief sample scenario. We have Jane, and her supervisor makes insensitive comments toward her, and she's afraid to raise concerns due to fear of retaliation. So she can use the Ethics Lifeline to send an anonymous message to report the issue, and the committee designated to address these complaints will immediately receive a notification with the message. And from there, the committee can decide how they want to take action. So they're able to send an announcement either to the entire organization or to a specific department, division, or location with their plans to address the issue. So if you're interested in taking a look further into the system at how this works, we'd be happy to show you. Just contact one of us. If you have anything you want to add about this, Raquel?
Yeah, no, it's super really nice feature that we've added, especially in our world today. Not that ethics, Lifeline is something brand new, but giving a platform for those employees to speak up so the organization can take action. So again, please reach out to us. Happy to show this functionality to you. It's super, super, super simple and very effective. Okay, so this is our contact information. And so Heidi was super gracious with allowing us to share her contact details. So you've got mine, you've got Heidi's, you've got Kayleen's, and then Kayleen, I know you wanted to mention about our resources there.
Absolutely. So if you'd like to follow us on LinkedIn, we do share additional resources, articles, and updates about the industry, and we'd be happy to have you join us. And maybe you can just jump into the comments on any of our posts if something sticks out to you and you want to engage with us further. So the link is there, but we're just Bullseye Engagement on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayleen. And Heidi, thank you so much for for your time and putting together this information to share with everyone here as some really great best practices and tips that will be very helpful. So with that, thank you everybody, and it looks like we are right on time.
Yay! Thank you, Raquel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have an awesome day, everybody.
Thank you.